Hello, welcome to Sleepy History Past. Settle in, close your eyes if you like, and let the gentle rhythm of these words carry you into a peaceful rest. Tonight, we begin a long, calm journey through the vast and wondrous world of the Pre-Columbian Americas and the native civilizations that flourished there long before European ships touched these shores. This is the story of peoples who shaped landscapes, built enduring monuments, cultivated the earth in harmony with nature, and created rich societies across two continents. We will unfold this tale slowly, fact by fact, like stars appearing one by one in a quiet night sky. The pre-Columbian era refers to the time in the Americas before significant European contact, beginning with the first arrivals of people tens of thousands of years ago, and continuing until the late 15th century. These lands were never empty or untouched. They were home to millions of individuals living in diverse cultures, from vast empires to intricate networks of villages and nomadic groups. The Americas were a mosaic of human achievement, where innovation arose independently in response to varied environments, from icy northern plains to tropical jungles, towering mountains, and fertile river valleys. The story begins with the peopling of the Americas. Long ago, during the last ice age, when sea levels were lower, a land bridge known as Beringia connected Siberia to what is now Alaska. Groups of hunter-gatherers, following herds of large animals like mammoths and bison, crossed this bridge in waves. Some scholars place the earliest arrivals as far back as 40,000 years ago, though the most widely accepted evidence points to migrations around 20,000 to 15,000 years ago. These Paleo-Indians spread southward over millennia, adapting to new climates and resources as they went. By around 12,000 years ago, their descendants had reached the southern tip of South America, leaving traces in sites like Monte Verde in Chile, where preserved plant remains and tools suggest a sophisticated use of the environment. As the Ice Age ended and climates warmed, these early peoples transitioned from big game hunting to more diverse ways of living. In many regions, they began to experiment with plant cultivation. Agriculture emerged independently in several places, transforming societies. In Mesoamerica, the region encompassing parts of modern Mexico and Central America, people domesticated maize, or corn, around 7,000 to 5,000 years ago. This staple crop, along with beans and squash, formed what is known as the Three Sisters planting system, a brilliant method where the plants support one another. Corn provides a stalk for beans to climb, beans fix nitrogen in the soil, and squash spreads out to suppress weeds and retain moisture. Further south, in the Andean region of South America, another cradle of agriculture developed. Their potatoes were domesticated as early as 8,000 years ago, along with quinoa, peanuts, and cotton. These crops allowed populations to grow and settle in high-altitude valleys and coastal deserts. In the Norte Chico region of Peru, one of the oldest known civilizations in the Americas arose around 3000 BCE. Known also as Caroll Soup, this society built large platform mounds and plazas without relying on pottery or intensive warfare, relying instead on irrigation canals to water cotton fields and support fishing communities. Their settlements featured monumental architecture, suggesting organized labor and shared cultural practices focused on ceremony rather than conquest. Moving northward in time and space, the Olmec civilization emerged along the Gulf Coast of Mexico between 1500 and 400 BCE. Often called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the Olmecs created colossal basalt heads, some weighing up to 50 tons, carved with individualized features, perhaps representing rulers or deities. They developed early forms of writing symbols, played a ritual ball game that involved rubber balls and stone courts, and influenced later societies with their art, religion, and social organization. Olmec centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta featured massive earthen pyramids and jade carvings traded across long distances. From these foundations, the Maya civilization blossomed. Beginning around 2000 BCE with village farming communities, the Maya reached their classic period between 250 and 900 CE. They built towering cities like Tikal, Palenque, and Capan, with stepped pyramids, intricate stone carvings, and observatories aligned to track the movements of Venus and the Sun. The Maya developed one of the most advanced writing systems in the ancient world, a hieroglyphic script that recorded history, astronomy, and prophecy on stone monuments, pottery, and bark paper books. Their mathematicians understood the concept of zero independently and used a vigesimal base 20 number system. Astronomy was central to their worldview. They created precise calendars, including the long count that tracked vast cycles of time. In the Andean highlands, societies like the Chavin culture, around 900–200 BCE, unified religious practices through art and architecture. Chavin de Huenter featured a temple complex with underground galleries and a famous Lanzan stone carving depicting a fanged deity. These influences spread widely, setting patterns for later Andean cultures such as the Moche and Nazca. The Moche, flourishing from 100 to 700 CE on Peru's northern coast, built adobe pyramids like the Huaca del Sol and produced exquisite ceramics depicting daily life, warfare, and ritual sacrifice. The Nazca in the southern desert created enormous geoglyphs, lines and shapes visible only from the air, perhaps as pathways for ceremonies or astronomical markers. North of Mesoamerica, in what is now the United States, diverse cultures thrived without the large urban empires seen farther south. In the eastern woodlands, the Adena and Hopewell cultures, 1000 BCE to 500 CE, constructed massive earthen mounds for burials and ceremonies. Hopewell trade networks stretched from the Gulf of Mexico to the Great Lakes, exchanging copper, obsidian, and shells. Later, the Mississippian culture arose around 800 CE, centered on maize agriculture. The most impressive site was Cahokia, near modern St. Louis, which at its peak around 1100 CE covered several square miles and housed 10,000 to 20,000 people, making it larger than many European cities of the time. Monk's Mound, the central pyramid, rose over 100 feet and required immense coordinated labor. Cahokia featured a grand plaza, wooden stockades, and evidence of long-distance trade. Across the southwest, ancestral Pueblo peoples, formerly called Anasazi, built remarkable cliff dwellings and multi-story pueblos like those at Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon. From around 850 to 1250 CE, Chaco Canyon served as a ceremonial center with great houses containing hundreds of rooms, connected by straight roads that stretched across the landscape. These structures used sophisticated masonry and incorporated solar alignments for solstices. In the Pacific Northwest, coastal peoples developed complex hunter-gatherer societies supported by abundant salmon runs. They built large wooden plank houses, carved totem poles, and engaged in extensive trade without intensive farming. Further north, in the Arctic and subarctic, Inuit and other groups adapted ingeniously to extreme cold, using kayaks, igloos, and harpoons to thrive. Estimates suggest that before 1492, the total population of the Americas ranged from 45 to 60 million people, with some scholars proposing higher figures. Central Mexico alone may have supported millions in dense agricultural valleys. Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital built on an inland lake, housed perhaps 200,000 residents with chinampas, floating gardens that produced abundant food. The Inca Empire Tawantinsuyu stretched over 2,500 miles along the Andes by the 15th century, unified by a vast road system, terraced fields, and storehouses that ensured food security even in harsh mountain conditions. These societies were not isolated. They traded goods, ideas, and technologies across vast distances. Jade from Guatemala reached the Olmecs, turquoise from the southwest appeared in Mesoamerican sites, and shells from the Gulf traveled inland. Religions often centered on nature cycles, ancestors, and cosmic forces, expressed through art, dance, and offerings. Pre-Columbian Americas and the native civilizations that once thrived across these vast lands. Let your breathing slow, your body soften into the surface beneath you, and allow these words to drift over you like a calm river current. We continue exactly where the story paused, amid the quiet grandeur of societies that shaped mountains, rivers, and skies with patience and ingenuity. The Aztec people, known to themselves as the Mexica, rose to prominence in the Valley of Mexico during the 14th and 15th centuries. According to their own histories, they began as a wandering group guided by their patron deity Huitzilopochtli, who promised them a place where they would see an eagle perched on a cactus devouring a serpent. That sign appeared on an island in Lake Texcoco, and there they founded Tenochtitlan in 1325. What began as a small settlement of reed huts grew into one of the largest cities in the world at that time. By the early 1500s, Tenochtitlan covered about 5 square miles and supported a population estimated between 150,000 and 300,000 people. The city was built on an artificial island, expanded through chinampas, floating agricultural plots created by layering mud and vegetation on woven reed rafts. These chinampas were extraordinarily productive, yielding multiple harvests each year of maize, beans, squash, tomatoes, chili peppers, and flowers. Canals crisscrossed the city like streets, and long causeways connected the island to the mainland, allowing canoes and foot traffic to move freely. At the heart of Tenochtitlan stood the Templo Mayor, a massive dual pyramid dedicated to Huitzilopochtli and Tlaloc, the rain god. Each side of the pyramid featured steep stairs leading to twin temples at the summit. The structure was rebuilt and enlarged several times, each layer encasing the previous one like the growth rings of a tree. Archaeological excavations have revealed offerings buried within these layers: jade beads, obsidian blades, human remains from ritual contexts, and intricate stone sculptures. Surrounding the temple was the sacred precinct, home to other shrines, ball courts, and schools where young men learned warfare, history, poetry, and religious duties. Aztec society was highly organized. At the top was the Tlahtoni, the ruler, chosen from a noble lineage but confirmed by a council of elders. Below him were nobles, priests, warriors, merchants, artisans, and farmers. Education was universal for boys and girls in their respective Kamikak noble schools and Talpachkali commoner schools, where they learned practical skills, moral teachings, and the songs and poems that preserved history. The Aztecs placed great value on oratory and poetry. Their language, Nahuatl, allowed for beautiful metaphors, calling a child a precious feather or the heart the place of the sky. Markets bustled daily in Tlatelolco, the sister city, where traders exchanged goods from as far away as the Maya lowlands and the Pacific coast: cacao beans, quetzal feathers, turquoise, cotton mantles, and obsidian tools. Warfare played a central role in Aztec life, but it was not merely about conquest. Flower wars were ritualized battles fought to capture prisoners for sacrifice rather than to seize territory. Sacrifice, especially heart extraction, was believed to nourish the sun and keep the cosmos in motion. Captives were treated with honor before their ritual death. Some even lived for months among their captors. This practice, though shocking to later observers, was deeply tied to cosmology, the idea that blood was the sacred debt paid to the gods who had sacrificed themselves to create the world. Further south, the Inca Empire, known as Tawantinsuyu, the 4 parts together, emerged in the highlands of Peru around the 13th century and expanded dramatically under leaders like Pachacuti in the 1400s. By the time of the Spanish arrival, it stretched over 2,500 miles from present-day Ecuador to central Chile, encompassing diverse ecological zones: coastal deserts, Andean peaks, Amazonian forests, and Pacific islands. The Inca achieved this unity without writing in the conventional sense. Instead, they used quipus, knotted cords of different colors and thicknesses, to record numerical data such as census figures, tribute payments, and military roles. Specialists called quipucameoc interpreted these cords with remarkable accuracy. The Inca road system was one of the engineering marvels of the ancient world. Over 25,000 miles of roads connected the empire, paved with stone in mountainous areas and lined with steps where needed. Suspension bridges of woven iku grass spanned deep chasms, rebuilt annually by local communities as part of their labor obligation. Along the roads stood chasquis, relay runners who carried messages at speeds up to 150 miles per day. Rest stops called tambos provided food and shelter, while storehouses held vast reserves of dried potatoes, maize, and freeze-dried meat, charqui, to prevent famine during droughts or wars. Inca society was organized around the Ailu, a kinship-based community that collectively worked the land. Everyone contributed labor through the mita system, serving the state for set periods in construction, farming, weaving, or military service. In return, the state provided food, clothing, and protection. The Sapa Inca, the emperor, was considered a living descendant of the sun god Inti. His capital, Cusco, was laid out in the shape of a puma, with the Coricancha temple at its heart. The Coricancha's walls were covered in gold sheets that reflected sunlight, creating an effect of living light. Gardens around the temple contained gold and silver replicas of plants, animals, and people, miniature representations of the empire's abundance. Agriculture in the Andes required extraordinary adaptation. Terraces carved into steep slopes prevented erosion and created microclimates for different crops. Irrigation canals brought water from highland springs, and raised fields in wetter zones improved drainage. The Inca cultivated over 3,000 varieties of potatoes alone, each suited to specific altitudes and soils. They also domesticated llamas and alpacas for wool, meat, and transport, and guinea pigs for food. These animals were integral to daily life and religious ceremonies. In the Amazon basin, societies were equally sophisticated but less centralized. Large settlements with earthen platforms and palisades dotted riverbanks. People practiced agroforestry, managing forests to produce fruit, nuts, medicinal plants, and useful timber. They cultivated manioc, sweet potatoes, and peppers, and fished with weirs and poisons derived from plants. Some groups built large earthen mounds that served as ceremonial centers or elite residences. Evidence from sites like Marajo Island shows complex pottery, burial urns, and trade networks extending to the Andes and Caribbean. Across the Caribbean, the Taino people lived in villages of circular thatched houses called bohios, arranged around a central plaza used for ceremonies and games. They grew cassava, sweet potatoes, and cotton, and harvested seafood from reefs and rivers. Their society was organized into caciques, chiefs, Nitanos, nobles, and Naborias, commoners. Religious life centered on zemis, sacred objects made of wood, stone, or bone representing spirits, and cohoba ceremonies, where shamans inhaled a hallucinogenic snuff to communicate with ancestors and deities. The Taino ball game Beatty was played on plazas with a rubber ball, and matches carried social and political significance. In the Great Plains of North America, nomadic and semi-sedentary groups followed bison herds. They used every part of the animal, hides for tippies and clothing, bones for tools, sinew for thread. In the eastern woodlands, Iroquoian-speaking peoples formed the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Five Nations, Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, Seneca by the 15th century. This alliance operated on principles of consensus and balance, with women holding significant influence in choosing leaders and controlling agriculture. Their longhouses sheltered multiple families, and their oral traditions preserved laws, histories, and teachings. The Pacific Northwest coast supported some of the most complex hunter-gatherer societies on Earth. Salmon runs provided reliable protein, allowing permanent villages with large cedar plank houses. Leaders hosted potlatches, ceremonial feasts where wealth was redistributed through gifts. Totem poles told family histories and clan crests in carved cedar, rising high above the villages. Artisans created masks, rattles, and canoes with intricate designs that blended realism and symbolism. These civilizations were not static. They evolved over centuries, adapting to climate shifts, population pressures, and interactions with neighbors. Some cities were abandoned and rebuilt elsewhere, perhaps due to soil exhaustion or political changes. Others endured for generations, their monuments still standing as quiet testaments to human skill and vision. Let these images rest lightly in your mind, the gleam of gold on temple walls, the green patchwork of chinampas on a lake, the steady rhythm of feet along mountain roads, the soft splash of canoes in twilight. The Americas before European arrival were places of deep knowledge, shared labor, and spiritual connection to the earth. Breathe slowly now, and when you are ready, the story will continue, carrying you deeper into this quiet, magnificent past. In the arid southwest of North America, the ancestral Pueblo peoples, often remembered today through their remarkable cliff dwellings and great houses, created some of the most enduring architectural traditions on the continent. By around 850 CE, communities in what is now northwestern New Mexico gathered at Chaco Canyon, a place that became a major ceremonial and economic center. The great houses there, such as Pueblo Bonito, contained hundreds of rooms arranged in precise, multi-story layouts. Walls were built with carefully cut sandstone blocks, and roofs used heavy timber beams hauled from mountains many miles away. These structures incorporated solar and lunar alignments. Windows and doorways framed the rising sun on the summer solstice or the moon during its major standstill cycle every 18.6 years. Chaco Canyon was connected to outlying communities by an extensive system of straight, wide roads, some stretching over 60 miles, cut through canyons and over mesas with remarkable engineering. These roads were not primarily for everyday travel. Many appear to have served ritual processions, pilgrimages, or the movement of goods during ceremonies. Trade brought macaw feathers from tropical forests far to the south, turquoise from local mines, shells from the Gulf of California, and copper bells from western Mexico. The presence of these exotic items in Chaco's sites speaks to long-distance networks sustained over centuries. After a prolonged drought in the late 12th and early 13th centuries, many Chaco sites were gradually abandoned, but the knowledge and traditions migrated northward and westward. Descendant communities built remarkable cliff dwellings at places like Mesa Verde in present-day Colorado. Between 1150 and 1300 CE, families constructed multi-room pueblos tucked into natural alcoves high on canyon walls. These dwellings offered protection from weather and perhaps from conflict, with kivas, circular underground ceremonial chambers, built into the floors. Access was often by ladders or hand and toe holds carved into the rock. Inside, families cooked on hearths, stored maize in sealed jars, and wove cotton textiles dyed with plant colors. Pottery from this era shows intricate black on white designs featuring geometric patterns, birds, and abstract motifs that carried symbolic meaning. Further west in the Hohokam region of what is now southern Arizona, another sophisticated agricultural society thrived from around 300 to 1450 CE. The Hohokam engineered one of the most extensive canal systems in the ancient world, digging hundreds of miles of channels to divert water from the Salt and Gila rivers onto desert fields. These canals, some lined with clay to reduce seepage, supported intensive farming of maize, agave, cotton, and squash. Villages featured large ball courts, oval depressions with earthen embankments, where a rubber ball game similar to Mesoamerican traditions was played. The Hohokam also produced beautiful red on buff pottery, etched shells, and platform mounds that likely served ceremonial purposes. Their trade networks reached the Pacific coast for shells and the north for turquoise. In the eastern woodlands, beyond the Mississippian mound centers like Cahokia, smaller but equally complex societies continued to flourish. The Fort Ancient culture, centered in the Ohio River Valley from about 1000 to 1750 CE, built villages surrounded by circular or oval enclosures made of earth and timber. These enclosures sometimes contained sacred spaces or served defensive purposes. People here cultivated the Three Sisters crops and hunted deer, turkey, and small game. Their pottery was cord-marked and later incised with designs, and they buried their dead in cemeteries with grave goods such as shell beads, copper ornaments, and pipes carved from stone. Along the Atlantic coast and into the southeast, Algonquian and Siouan-speaking groups lived in semi-permanent villages of dome-shaped or long rectangular houses covered with bark or thatch. They practiced shifting cultivation, moving fields every few years to allow soil recovery, and supplemented diets with fishing, shellfish gathering, and seasonal hunts. Wampum beads made from quahog clam shells and whelk shells served as currency, memory aids, and diplomatic gifts. Strings and belts of wampum recorded treaties, histories, and messages, their colors and patterns carrying specific meanings. In California, diverse groups adapted to a landscape of extraordinary ecological variety. Coastal peoples harvested acorns as a staple, processing them through leaching to remove tannins, then grinding them into meal for bread or porridge. Inland groups in the Central Valley hunted elk and gathered tule reeds for mats and boats. In the Sierra Nevada foothills, communities used controlled burns to manage oak groves and encourage game. Baskets from this region are among the finest in the world, tightly coiled, watertight, and decorated with intricate patterns of feathers, shells, and dyed fibers. The Great Basin and Plateau regions supported mobile hunter-gatherer societies that moved seasonally to follow plant ripening and animal migrations. Piñon pine nuts, roots, berries, and small game formed the core of diets. People built conical brush lodges or used rock shelters, crafting lightweight carrying baskets, digging sticks, and nets. In the Columbia Plateau, salmon runs provided abundant protein. Families dried fish on racks and stored it for winter. Trade fairs along major rivers brought obsidian tools, dentalium shells, and feathers from distant places. In the Arctic and subarctic, Inuit and Yupik peoples developed technologies perfectly suited to extreme cold. They hunted seals from kayaks and umiaks, larger skin boats, and pursued caribou on land with bows and arrows tipped with stone or bone points. Snow houses, igloos, provided temporary shelter during winter hunts, while semi-subterranean winter houses offered warmth through sod, whalebone frames, and oil lamps for heat and light. Clothing made from caribou or seal hides with inner and outer layers trapped body heat while allowing moisture to escape. Oral traditions, songs, and storytelling preserved knowledge of navigation, weather patterns, and animal behavior across generations. Throughout these regions, spiritual practices emphasized balance and reciprocity with the natural world. Many societies recognized a web of relations between humans, animals, plants, rivers, mountains, and celestial bodies. Shamans or medicine people mediated these connections through songs, dances, fasting, and vision quests. Ceremonies marked seasonal changes, successful hunts, harvests, and life transitions. Offerings of cornmeal, tobacco, or feathers were placed in sacred places to express gratitude and maintain harmony. Art across the Americas reflected this worldview. Rock paintings in deep canyons depicted hunts and spiritual beings. Pottery carried symbols of fertility, rain, and cosmic order. Textiles woven on backstrap looms or upright looms featured geometric designs that encoded stories or clan identities. Masks carved from wood, often painted and adorned with feathers, were worn in dances that reenacted myths or honored ancestors. These societies, spread across 2 continents, shared no single political system or technology, yet they all demonstrated profound understanding of their environments. They engineered landscapes to sustain growing populations, developed foods that nourished millions, built monuments that aligned with the stars, and maintained oral libraries of knowledge passed through song, story, and ritual. Their achievements remind us of humanity's capacity for creativity, cooperation, and deep connection to place. Across much of Mesoamerica and the Andes, societies developed highly stratified yet interdependent social organizations. In many places, kinship remained the foundation of community life. Extended families or clans shared land, labor, and responsibilities. In the Aztec world, for instance, each calpulli, a ward or neighborhood group, functioned almost like a small republic. It owned land collectively, elected representatives to higher councils, maintained its own school, and organized communal work projects. Members of a calpuli supported one another in times of need, and loyalty to the group was reinforced through shared rituals and ancestor veneration. Women held respected roles in many of these societies, though the exact degree of influence varied. Among the Aztecs, women managed households, wove textiles that served as both clothing and tribute currency, brewed pulque, a fermented agave drink, and participated in markets as vendors. Midwives and healers were often female, possessing deep herbal knowledge passed down through generations. In some Andean communities, women worked the fields alongside men, managed household stores, and played key parts in textile production, creating finely woven cloth that carried symbolic patterns and sometimes served as offerings to deities. In the Haudenosaunee Confederacy of the Northeast, women exercised considerable authority. Clan mothers chose and could remove male sachems, peace chiefs, and war leaders. Land and longhouse ownership passed through the female line, giving women control over agriculture and the stability of the community. This matrilineal structure influenced decision-making at every level, from family matters to diplomacy between nations. Daily life followed seasonal and ceremonial cycles. In agricultural regions, the year revolved around planting, tending, and harvesting. Farmers used wooden digging sticks tipped with fire-hardened points, or in the Andes, foot plows called chaquitacla to turn soil. Fields were often worked communally during peak seasons, with songs and chants helping coordinate effort and lighten the labor. After the harvest, surplus food was stored in granaries or underground pits lined with stone or basketry to protect against dampness and pests. Hunting and fishing supplemented plant foods in many areas. In the Amazon, people used blowguns with poison-tipped darts made from curare derived from vines. Along rivers and coasts, nets, weirs, hooks, and harpoons brought in fish, shellfish, turtles, and manatees. In the plains, communal bison drives, sometimes stampeding herds over cliffs, provided meat, hides, and bones in large quantities, shared according to custom among participants. Cooking methods were ingenious and varied. Mesoamericans nixtamalized maize by soaking it in lime water, which unlocked nutrients and made the kernels easier to grind into dough for tortillas or tamales. Andean peoples freeze dried potatoes by exposing them to nighttime frost and daytime sun, creating chuño that could be stored for years. Smoking, drying, salting, and fermenting preserved fish, meat, and fruits across regions. Clothing reflected both environment and status. In warmer climates, people wore minimal garments of cotton or maguey fiber, often brightly dyed or embroidered. Nobles and priests donned elaborate feathered cloaks, headdresses of quetzal or macaw plumes, and jewelry of jade, turquoise, gold, and shell. In colder zones, layered hides, furs, and woven plant fiber capes provided insulation. Footwear ranged from sandals of yucca fiber or leather to snowshoes of bent wood and rawhide webbing in northern forests. Housing styles adapted to local materials and climate. In Mesoamerica, common homes were rectangular or square structures with adobe walls and flat or thatched roofs. In the Andes, rectangular houses of fieldstone or adobe had thatched or grass roofs and small windows to retain heat. In the Pacific Northwest, massive cedar plank longhouses could shelter dozens of people, with central fire pits and sleeping platforms along the walls. In the Arctic, semi-subterranean homes used whalebone or driftwood frames covered in sod, entered through low tunnels that blocked cold wind. Technology extended far beyond tools for food and shelter. Many groups mastered metallurgy without iron, working gold, silver, copper, and tumbaga, gold-copper alloy through hammering, casting, and lost wax techniques. In the Andes, metals were used for ornaments, ceremonial objects, and occasionally tools. Mesoamericans produced true bronze, copper arsenic, or copper tin alloys by the post-classic period, crafting bells, axes, and tweezers. Medicine drew on extensive plant knowledge. Shamans and herbalists treated ailments with remedies from willow bark containing salicin, a natural pain reliever, cinchona bark, source of quinine against fevers, and hundreds of other species. Surgical practices included trepanation, cutting openings in the skull to relieve pressure or treat head injuries, with many patients surviving, as shown by healed bone edges in archaeological remains. Midwifery included herbal teas to ease labor and techniques for turning breech babies. Astronomy and calendrics were highly developed in several regions. The Maya tracked Venus cycles with precision, predicting its appearances as morning or evening star. They maintained interlocking calendars, a 260-day ritual count Tzolk'in, and a 365-day solar year Hob, combining every 52 years into a calendar round. The Aztecs used a similar system, with the new fire ceremony celebrated every 52 years to ensure the sun would rise again. In the Andes, observations of Pleiades rising helped predict rainy seasons for planting. Mathematics supported these observations. The Maya used a positional vigesimal system with a true zero symbol, a shell glyph, centuries before it appeared in other parts of the world. They calculated long periods of time, recording dates reaching thousands of years into the past and future on monuments. Writing systems preserved histories, genealogies, and prophecies. Maya scribes painted glyphs on bark paper codices folded like accordions. Only a few survived the colonial era, but they contain astronomical tables, almanacs, and mythic narratives. Aztec codices used pictographic and ideographic conventions to record tribute lists, conquests, and rituals. In the Andes, while no conventional script existed, Quipus encoded quantitative and perhaps narrative information, supplemented by oral recitation. Music and dance animated ceremonies and daily life. Flutes of bone or reed, drums of wood and hide, rattles of seeds or copper, and trumpets of conch shell or ceramic produced layered sounds for rituals. Dances reenacted creation stories, hunts, battles, or seasonal changes, often involving elaborate costumes and synchronized movements that united communities. These elements, social bonds, daily labor, technological skill, healing wisdom, cosmic observation, and artistic expression, interwove to create resilient, meaningful ways of life. They were not frozen in time but constantly evolving, responding to environmental shifts, population growth, trade, and occasional conflict. Trade networks in the pre-Columbian Americas were vast and intricate, often spanning thousands of miles without the use of wheeled vehicles or draft animals in most regions. In Mesoamerica, merchants known as Pachteca traveled long distances under the protection of their guild-like organizations. They carried cacao beans, used both as food and currency, quetzal feathers, jade, obsidian blades, cotton textiles, and rubber products. These traders sometimes operated as spies, gathering information on distant polities while disguised as ordinary merchants. Markets in cities like Tenochtitlan operated daily, with specialized sections for every type of good, from live turkeys and dogs raised for food to finely worked gold ornaments and medicinal herbs. Barter was common, but cacao beans and cotton mantles often served as standardized units of value. In the Andes, the Inca state coordinated trade on an imperial scale. State warehouses stored surplus goods, and llama caravans moved textiles, dried fish, coca leaves, metals, and ceramics along the road network. Coastal communities sent dried fish and guano, used as fertilizer, to highland centers, while highland peoples sent potatoes, quinoa, and wool downward. The exchange was not always commercial. Much of it operated through reciprocal obligations between communities and the state. Luxury goods such as spondylus shells from warm Pacific waters were reserved for elite and ceremonial use, symbolizing connection to the sea and the divine. North of Mesoamerica, the Hopewell interaction sphere, circa 200 BCE 500 C, linked distant regions through exchange. Copper from the western Great Lakes, obsidian from the Rocky Mountains, marine shells from the Gulf Coast, and grizzly bear teeth from the northern plains all converged in Ohio Valley burial mounds. These goods were not merely traded, they were transformed into elaborate ornaments, copper plates cut into bird and animal shapes, mica sheets shaped into geometric forms, and pipes carved from pipestone quarried hundreds of miles away. The movement of these items suggests shared ideologies, perhaps centered on shamanic practices and the journey of the soul. Further west, the Chaco system in the southwest created a hub of interaction. Macaws were brought alive from tropical lowlands, kept in pens, and their feathers used in ceremonial objects. Turquoise mined in New Mexico traveled south into Mesoamerica, possibly in exchange for copper bells and macaw feathers. Shell jewelry from the California coast and the Gulf of California appeared in Chaco great houses, indicating maritime as well as overland connections. In the Pacific Northwest, trade flourished without centralized states. Dentalium shells from the northern coast served as a form of currency across wide areas. Obsidian from volcanic sources was exchanged over hundreds of miles, shaped into razor-sharp tools. Canoe travel allowed coastal groups to move large quantities of dried salmon, eulachon grease, a rich oil from small fish, and cedar products to interior communities, receiving in return dried roots, berries, and hides. Diplomacy and alliance building were as important as trade. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, formed perhaps in the 15th century, created a sophisticated system of governance based on the Great Law of Peace. Representatives from each nation met in council under the symbolic Tree of Peace, where decisions required consensus. Wampum belts recorded agreements and served as mnemonic devices during oral recitations of the law. This confederacy influenced later democratic ideas, as some scholars note similarities with the structure of the United States Constitution. In Mesoamerica, city-states formed shifting alliances through marriage, gift exchange, and military pacts. Rulers sent daughters to marry into neighboring dynasties, cementing ties. Elite gifts, feathered shields, jade ear spools, cacao sealed friendships. When alliances failed, warfare followed, but even conflict was ritualized. Captives were taken not only for sacrifice, but also to demonstrate prestige and feed the cosmic order. Conflict, though present, varied greatly in scale and purpose. In some regions, warfare was seasonal and limited, aimed at capturing prisoners rather than territory. In others, such as the Inca expansion under Pachacuti and his successors, conquest was systematic. Armies moved along the road system, subdued neighboring groups, and incorporated them into the empire through resettlement, labor obligations, and the installation of loyal governors. Conquered peoples were often allowed to keep their local customs as long as they paid tribute and provided troops when called. Migration and resettlement were recurring themes. When environmental conditions shifted, prolonged drought in the southwest, volcanic eruptions in parts of Mesoamerica, or resource depletion, communities moved. Oral traditions across many groups record journeys of origin. The Mexica migration from Aztlan guided by their god, the Inca emergence from Lake Titicaca or a cave at Pacaratambo, the Navajo and Apache stories of arrival from northern lands. These migration narratives often served as charters of identity, linking people to sacred places and ancestors. Innovation continued until the very end of the Pre-Columbian era. New crops were developed, irrigation systems expanded, and architectural techniques refined. In the Amazon, terra preta, soils enriched with charcoal, bone, and organic waste, created fertile patches in otherwise nutrient-poor tropical environments, allowing denser settlement than previously thought possible. In the Caribbean, the Taino developed canuco agriculture, mounded fields that improved drainage and fertility, while cultivating tobacco, which they used in sacred rituals. Across the continents, knowledge of the natural world was encyclopedic. People knew which plants could treat infections, reduce fever, ease pain, or induce visions. They understood animal behavior so precisely that hunters could predict migrations and set ambushes with minimal waste. Fishermen read tides, currents, and bird movements to locate schools of fish. Farmers observed subtle changes in weather patterns, plant flowering, and insect activity to time planting and harvest. This accumulated wisdom was not written in books in most regions, but it was never lost. It lived in stories told around fires, in songs sung during planting, in the patterns woven into textiles, in the placement of stones and the orientation of buildings. Each generation added to the inheritance, adapting it to new circumstances while preserving its core. Now imagine the soft clink of shell beads being strung into a necklace, the rustle of maize leaves in a warm breeze, the distant echo of a conch trumpet calling across a valley, the careful hands of a weaver passing the shuttle through warp threads dyed with cochineal red. These small, enduring acts of creation and care formed the heartbeat of countless lives. Across the Americas, people understood the world as alive with spirit and interconnected in ways that modern separations between human, animal, plant, and place did not exist. In many traditions, mountains were regarded as living beings, grandfathers or sleeping giants, who could grant fertility, rain, or protection when properly honored. Rivers carried not only water, but also the stories and souls of ancestors. Stars, sun, moon, and planets were seen as kin or deities moving through purposeful cycles. In Mesoamerica, this worldview found especially elaborate expression. The Aztecs conceived of time and space as layered realities. The present era was the fifth sun, preceded by 4 previous worlds destroyed by flood, fire, wind, and jaguars. Each destruction and rebirth required divine sacrifice. The gods had given their blood to set the current sun in motion, and humans continued that debt through offerings. The calendar itself was sacred. Every day bore a name and number combination that carried omens, influencing naming, marriage, warfare, and even the timing of planting. Priests consulted divinatory books to interpret these signs, guiding entire communities through uncertainty. The Maya cosmos was similarly multi-layered. They pictured the universe as a great ceiba tree whose roots reached into the underworld Xibalba. Trunk formed the visible world, and branches supported the upper sky. The Milky Way was sometimes seen as a cosmic road or the world tree itself. Caves and cenotes, natural sinkholes, were entrances to the underworld, places of both danger and fertility where rain gods Chaks dwelled. Offerings of jade, ceramics, human remains, and incense were placed in these watery openings to petition for rain and agricultural abundance. Ritual life permeated every level of society. In the Andes, the Inca performed capacacha ceremonies in times of crisis, drought, illness of the Sapa Inca, or military threat, sending chosen children, finely dressed and adorned, to high mountain peaks as offerings to mountain deities Apis. These children were given coca, chicha, corned beer, and food before being placed in small stone chambers or simply left in high, cold places to fall asleep eternally. Archaeological finds on peaks like Lulelaco reveal mummified remains still wearing feathered headdresses and carrying small gold and silver figurines, preserved by ice for centuries. Blood offerings appeared in many forms. In Mesoamerica, auto-sacrifice, piercing the tongue, earlobes, or genitals with stingray spines or obsidian blades, was a common act of devotion performed by rulers and priests to nourish the gods. The flowing blood was caught on bark paper and burned, sending the life force skyward as smoke. Public heart extractions during major festivals were dramatic extensions of this principle, believed essential to prevent the sun from failing to rise. Ball games, played across much of Mesoamerica and into parts of the Southwest, carried deep symbolic weight. The rubber ball made from the latex of the Castilla elastica tree was struck only with hips, shoulders, elbows, and knees in a high-walled court. Matches could settle disputes, mark astronomical events, or reenact mythic struggles between light and darkness, day and night, or life and death. In some instances, the captain of the losing team met ritual death, though in other contexts the game was more recreational or diplomatic. Monumental architecture reflected these beliefs in cosmic order. Pyramids were artificial mountains, stairways symbolic paths between worlds. The Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan, built centuries before the Aztecs, rises in 7-stepped levels and aligns with celestial phenomena. Its base covers nearly as much area as the Great Pyramid of Giza, yet it was constructed without metal tools or beasts of burden, only human labor, baskets, ropes, and rollers. Beneath the pyramid, archaeologists found tunnels containing offerings, greenstone masks, shells filled with liquid mercury, symbolizing underworld waters and carved jaguar figures. In the Maya lowlands, temples crowned with roof combs pierced the jungle canopy, allowing rulers to speak to the sky. Steely tall stone slabs stood in plazas carved with portraits of kings in elaborate regalia, accompanied by long hieroglyphic texts recording accessions, victories, captures, and astronomical events. At sites like Palenque, the Temple of the Inscriptions contains the tomb of Inish-Janab Pakal, whose sarcophagus lid depicts him falling into the underworld mouth of a celestial monster while being reborn as the maize god. In North America, earthworks carried similar meaning. Serpent Mound in Ohio, built by the Fort Ancient or Adena people around 1,000 years ago, stretches over a quarter-mile in a sinuous shape that may represent a serpent swallowing an egg or sun. Its curves align with solstices and lunar standstills, suggesting careful astronomical observation. Effigy mounds across the upper Midwest took the forms of bears, birds, panthers, and humans, perhaps marking clan territories or serving as ceremonial platforms. Even in less centralized societies, sacred geography shaped daily experience. In the Great Plains, medicine wheels, circles of stone with radiating lines, were built on high places, possibly as calendars or vision quest sites. In the Pacific Northwest, petroglyphs carved into coastal rock depicted spirit helpers, thunderbirds, and sea creatures, visible only at certain tides. In California, painted caves held images of shamans in trance, surrounded by dots and zigzags representing altered states of consciousness. These beliefs were never separate from practical life. A farmer planting maize might sing to the seeds, place a small offering of tobacco in the first hole, or time the sowing according to the appearance of certain stars. A hunter might speak words of respect to the animal before the kill, thanking its spirit for the gift of life. A weaver might weave a pattern that told a family story or invoked protection. Every act participated in maintaining balance. Now picture the flicker of copal incense rising in a darkened temple, the slow turning of a rubber ball across a stone court under starlight, the patient carving of a stela by lamplight, the quiet footsteps of a child climbing a sacred peak with a coca leaf in hand. These moments of reverence and connection formed the deep current beneath daily existence. Many of the great centers experienced cycles of rise, flourishing, decline, and transformation rather than sudden collapse. In the Maya lowlands during the Classic period, 250–900 CE, dozens of independent city-states competed and cooperated. Some, like Tikal and Calakmul, grew into superpowers with populations in the tens of thousands, exerting influence through marriage alliances, warfare, and tribute. Monumental construction peaked in the 8th century, with ever taller temples and longer inscriptions recording royal deeds. Yet by the 9th and 10th centuries, many southern lowland cities were gradually abandoned. The causes were likely multiple and intertwined. Prolonged droughts documented in lake sediment cores and stalagmite records, overexploitation of soils and forests, population pressure straining resources, intensified warfare disrupting trade, and possibly shifts in political legitimacy as rulers could no longer guarantee prosperity through ritual and agricultural success. Importantly, this was not a civilization-wide disappearance. Northern Maya cities such as Chichen Itza and Mayapan rose in prominence during the post-Classic period, 900–1500 CE, incorporating new architectural styles influenced by contacts with central Mexico, columns shaped like feathered serpents, warrior imagery, and cenote-focused rituals. Trade intensified, with coastal canoe routes carrying goods between the Yucatan, Honduras, and Panama. Salt from coastal flats, obsidian from highland sources, and cacao from southern lowlands flowed through these networks, sustaining urban life even as southern centers quieted. In central Mexico, Teotihuacan, once the largest city in the Americas with perhaps 100,000–200,000 inhabitants, reached its zenith between 100 and 550 CE. Its grid-planned urban layout, massive apartment compounds housing extended families, and broad avenue of the dead created a sense of ordered cosmic harmony. Workshops produced obsidian tools on an industrial scale for export across Mesoamerica. Around 550–650 CE, many structures along the central avenue were deliberately burned in what appears to have been an internal uprising or ritual termination rather than foreign invasion. After the burning, the city continued to be occupied on a smaller scale, and its cultural influence persisted for centuries, seen in later Aztec reverence for Teotihuacan as the place where the gods gathered to create the current sun. The Toltec civilization, flourishing at Tula from about 900 to 1150 CE, bridged Teotihuacan's legacy and the Aztec world. Tula's iconic Atlantean warrior columns, tall stone figures of armed men, stood atop pyramids, symbolizing military might. Toltec art and architecture spread widely, influencing Chichen Itza through what may have been trade, pilgrimage, or elite migration. Myths later recorded by the Aztecs portrayed the Toltecs as wise craftsmen, inventors of featherworking and builders of great cities, whose fall was attributed to internal strife and the trickster god Tezcatlipoca. In the American Southwest, environmental stress also shaped trajectories. After the Chaco fluorescence, communities dispersed into smaller, more defensible pueblos during the 13th century. Some groups migrated southward, contributing to the emergence of Hopi villages on mesa tops. Others moved into Rio Grande Valley settlements that grew into multi-story adobe pueblos still inhabited today. These adaptations, smaller scale, greater reliance on local resources, diversified farming with drought-resistant crops, allowed continuity even as larger systems contracted. In the Mississippi Valley, Cahokia's decline around 1350 CE followed a similar pattern of environmental and social strain. Prolonged flooding, possibly combined with maize monoculture depleting soils and cooler temperatures during the Little Ice Age, reduced agricultural yields. As the central authority weakened, satellite communities became more independent, and the once grand plaza fell silent. Yet Mississippian traditions continued in smaller mound centers across the southeast until European contact. The Amazon region, long thought to support only small, mobile groups, has revealed evidence of much greater complexity in recent decades. Geoglyphs, large geometric enclosures, dot deforested areas in Bolivia and Brazil. Vast networks of raised causeways and canals managed seasonal flooding. Terra preta soils, intentionally created through the addition of charcoal, bone ash, and organic refuse, transformed infertile land into permanently fertile plots capable of supporting dense populations. These anthropogenic soils remain productive centuries later, demonstrating sophisticated ecological engineering. Coastal Ecuador and northern Peru supported maritime societies that navigated balsa rafts far offshore, fishing with nets and hooks and trading spondylus shells valued across the Andes. These seafaring traditions may have facilitated the spread of crops like maize southward and sweet potatoes northward, contributing to agricultural diffusion long before European arrival. In North America's eastern woodlands, societies adapted flexibly to changing conditions. After the Hopewell decline, new ceramic styles, bow and arrow technology, replacing atlatls for more efficient hunting, and intensified maize agriculture supported growing populations. By the late woodland period, 501,000 CE, villages grew larger and more permanent, setting the stage for the Mississippian fluorescence. In the Great Lakes region, wild rice harvesting and fishing supported semi-sedentary communities that built birch bark canoes for trade and travel across interconnected waterways. Throughout these transformations, cultural continuity persisted. Pottery traditions evolved but retained core techniques and symbolic motifs. Agricultural knowledge accumulated over millennia, selective breeding of maize varieties for different climates, intercropping strategies, seed storage methods was never lost. Oral histories preserved accounts of migrations, great leaders, environmental lessons, and moral teachings. Sacred sites, mountains, springs, caves remain places of pilgrimage and reverence across generations. The arrival of Europeans in 1492 did not encounter empty lands or primitive societies, but rather a continent of sophisticated, diverse, and deeply rooted civilizations. Many of the plants cultivated in the Americas, maize, potatoes, tomatoes, beans, squash, peppers, cacao, peanuts, sunflowers, vanilla, tobacco, now feed billions worldwide. Agricultural techniques like chinampas, terracing, and terra preta continue to inspire modern sustainable farming. Architectural principles of alignment with celestial events inform contemporary discussions of ancient astronomy. Indigenous governance models, such as the consensus-based systems of the Haudenosaunee, contributed ideas to later democratic thought. Most importantly, descendant communities carry forward languages, stories, ceremonies, art forms, ecological knowledge, and ways of relating to the land. From the high Andes to the Arctic tundra, from desert pueblos to rainforest villages, living traditions demonstrate resilience and adaptation that span millennia. Now let these final images of continuity settle softly. The same maize kernel planted in the same soil for countless seasons, the echo of an ancient song still sung at dawn, the careful tending of a garden plot that once fed a city, the quiet presence of a mountain watching over generations. These threads weave the past into the present, unbroken. The pre-Columbian Americas were home to an astonishing range of societal scales and organizational forms. At one end stood vast, centralized empires like the Inca Tawantinsuyu, which at its height administered perhaps 10–12 million people across rugged Andean terrain through a bureaucracy of appointed officials, decimal-based census systems, and state labor obligations. At the other end lay highly egalitarian hunter-gatherer bands in parts of the Great Basin or California, where decisions were made by consensus among kin, leadership was fluid and task-specific, and wealth was deliberately redistributed through sharing rather than accumulated. Between these extremes flourished everything in between: the city-state mosaic of the Maya lowlands, the theocratic urbanism of Teotihuacan, the mound-centered chiefdoms of the Mississippian southeast, the loose confederacies of the Iroquois, the maritime ranked societies of the northwest coast, and the kinship-based villages of the Amazonian floodplains. What unites these varied forms is not uniformity, but ingenuity in response to place. In environments with short growing seasons and limited arable land, such as the high Andes or the northern plains, societies emphasized storage, reciprocity, and mobility. In fertile river valleys or lake basins, Tenochtitlan's lake system, the Mississippi bottomlands, the coastal plain of Peru, intensive agriculture supported large, sedentary populations and hierarchical structures. In tropical forests with thin soils, people turned to managed agroforestry, fish weirs, and enriched soils rather than plow-based farming. Each adaptation was a long conversation with the land, refined over centuries through trial, observation, and inherited wisdom. A striking feature across much of the Americas was the achievement of complexity without certain technologies common in the Old World. No beast of burden existed outside the llama and alpaca in the Andes. Wheels were known in toys but not used for transport, likely due to terrain and the absence of suitable draft animals. Yet monumental architecture rose, cities grew, long-distance trade flourished, and astronomical precision was attained. Labor was mobilized through kinship obligations, ritual motivation, communal feasting, and in some cases state coercion, but often without the rigid class divisions seen elsewhere. In many societies, prestige came from generosity rather than hoarding. Northwest coast potlatches, plains giveaway ceremonies, Andean reciprocal exchange all inverted accumulation into distribution as a path to status. Oral traditions served as vast living libraries. Without alphabetic writing in most regions, memory was trained from childhood through repetition, song, dance, and mnemonic devices. Inca quippus, while primarily numerical, were read aloud with accompanying narratives by specialists who memorized the contextual stories tied to each knot sequence. Aztec and Maya codices combined images with spoken recitation. A single painted page could trigger hours of detailed storytelling. In North America, wampum belts functioned similarly. The patterns of purple and white beads encoded treaties and histories, read during council meetings by keepers trained in their meaning. Winter storytelling seasons in many northern groups preserved ecological knowledge, moral lessons, and accounts of great events, floods, comets, migrations, passed with remarkable fidelity across centuries. This oral precision allowed societies to remember and respond to rare events. Drought cycles spanning decades, volcanic eruptions that darkened skies for years, or comet appearances were woven into myth and ritual, providing frameworks for interpreting and surviving future crises. The Aztec knew fire ceremony every 52 years, extinguishing all fires, kindling a new one on a sacrificial breast, and relighting the world, enshrined the memory of cosmic fragility and renewal. The global impact of these civilizations began long before 1492 through the diffusion of their domesticates. Maize spread from Mesoamerica northward into the southwest by 2000 BCE and eastward across the eastern woodlands by 200 CE, fundamentally altering diets and settlement patterns. Potatoes reached the high Andes early and after European contact became a staple from Ireland to China, helping fuel population growth in the Old World. Sweet potatoes crossed the Pacific, possibly through Polynesian voyaging, to reach Polynesia centuries before Columbus. Cacao, vanilla, tomatoes, chili peppers, peanuts, beans, squash, sunflowers, tobacco, all reshaped cuisines, economies, and even pharmacopoeias worldwide. These contributions continue in subtle ways. Modern permaculture draws inspiration from the Three Sisters intercropping and Andean raised fields. Restoration ecology studies terra preta as a model for carbon sequestration. Indigenous fire management practices in California and Australia, low-intensity burns to reduce fuel loads and encourage certain plants, are being readopted to prevent catastrophic wildfires. Traditional ecological knowledge informs conservation efforts in the Amazon, where communities maintain biodiversity through selective harvesting and forest gardening. The story of the Pre-Columbian Americas is therefore not one of lost worlds, but of persistent presence. Languages still spoken: Nahuatl, Quechua, Maya languages, Navajo, Lakota, Cree, Mapudungun, carry grammar, vocabulary, and concepts shaped over millennia. Ceremonial cycles continue. Solstice observances at Taos Pueblo, powwows across the plains, Inti Raymi festivals in the Andes. Agricultural varieties developed in ancient times, hundreds of maize landraces, potato cultivars, are still grown by descendant farmers who select seeds with the same care their ancestors did. As this long narration draws toward its close for tonight, let the images linger without effort. A grandmother teaching a child to tie knots in a cord that will one day record a harvest count, a farmer pressing a seed into dark, living soil enriched by generations before, a circle of voices rising in a song that has never been written down yet has never been forgotten, a mountain standing unchanged while human lives flow around its base like water. These are not relics, they are living continuities. Continuing from the profound stillness where ancient seeds, unbroken songs, and watchful mountains remind us of continuity across time, let every remaining trace of effort fall away. The body is now weightless in its rest, the mind a vast, open sky with only the faintest wisps of thought drifting across it. We draw this long, gentle narration toward a peaceful close by turning once more to the quiet, enduring presence of the people and places themselves, the living descendants, the landscapes that still carry memory, and the subtle ways the pre-Columbian world never truly ended. Today, Quechua is spoken by millions in Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, and parts of Argentina and Chile, more speakers than at any time in history. Conversations in marketplaces, songs at festivals, radio programs, children's bedtime stories, political speeches, and poetry all flow in a language that was already ancient when the Inca first rose to power. Many Quechua speakers maintain traditional agricultural practices, planting by moon phases, using foot plows on terraced fields, selecting potato varieties for specific microclimates, and storing chuño on rooftops where night frost and day sun repeat the preservation method developed thousands of years ago. In the Maya region of Guatemala, Belize, Mexico, and Honduras, over 30 Maya languages are still actively used. Kayich, Quechua, Caxical, and Yucatec Maya, among others, remain the first languages of hundreds of thousands of people. Communities continue to hold ceremonies at ancient sites, offering copal incense, candles, flowers, and petitions at the base of pyramids or beside sacred cenotes. The 260-day Tzolk'in calendar is still consulted by day keepers Ajkajab for naming children, choosing auspicious dates for marriage or house building, and interpreting dreams or illnesses. Traditional weaving on backstrap looms produces huipiles and cortes whose patterns carry clan histories, protective symbols, and regional identities, just as they did in classic period depictions. Pueblo communities in New Mexico and Arizona, Taos, Acoma, Zuni, Hopi, Laguna, and others, live in villages whose adobe architecture directly descends from ancestral Pueblo great houses and cliff dwellings. Many Pueblos have been continuously inhabited for over 1,000 years. Ceremonial kivas are still used for initiations, storytelling, and seasonal dances that honor rain, corn, deer, and the directions. Traditional dry farming, supplemented by acequia irrigation ditches first dug centuries ago, continues to produce blue corn, chili peppers, beans, and squash. Oral histories recount the migrations from Chaco and Mesa Verde, the lessons of drought, and the sacred responsibility to care for the land so that future generations may also live upon it. In the Pacific Northwest, Coast Salish, Tlingit, Haida, Kwakwaka'wakwa, Nuu-chah-nulth, and other nations maintain living traditions of cedar longhouses, totem pole carving, canoe building, and potlatch ceremonies. Salmon are still honored as relatives. First salmon ceremonies give thanks and ensure the run's return. Basketry, weaving, and mask-making flourish, with designs that tell family crests, origin stories, and spiritual encounters. Language revitalization programs teach younger generations words and songs that once risked fading. Across the Great Plains, Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Blackfeet, Crow, and many others gather for sun dances, sweat lodges, vision quests, and powwows where drums, songs, and regalia carry forward teachings from before the horse or the reservation era. The buffalo, once central to survival, is being reintroduced on tribal lands. Herds now roam parts of the northern plains once more, and traditional knowledge of butchering, tanning, and using every part of the animal is being actively practiced and taught. In the Amazon, indigenous peoples Yanomami, Quiapo, Ashaninka, Munduruku, Tucano, Dasana, and hundreds more defend vast territories that contain some of the highest biodiversity on Earth. Many continue swidden agriculture, managed forest groves, fishing with plant-derived poisons, and the use of ayahuasca and other plant medicines in shamanic healing and vision work. Their oral cosmologies describe the forest as a living society of beings, plants, animals, rivers, ancestors, who must be treated with respect. Contemporary struggles to protect land from deforestation, mining, and dams are framed in terms of ancient responsibilities to maintain balance. From Alaska to Patagonia, from the Arctic coast to Tierra del Fuego, indigenous languages, foods, medicines, stories, dances, and land-based practices persist. Some have adapted new tools, metal pots, rifles, outboard motors, solar panels, while preserving core values of reciprocity, respect for non-human kin, and intergenerational responsibility. Others have revived traditions that were suppressed. Powwows grew dramatically in the 20th century, language immersion schools are multiplying, land-back movements seek the return of ancestral territories, and cultural repatriation brings home sacred objects and human remains for proper reburial or care. These living threads remind us that the pre-Columbian Americas did not vanish. They adapted, endured suppression, resisted erasure, and continue to evolve. The same ingenuity that built chinampas, quipu records, Cahokian plazas, Chacon roads, Maya observatories, and Andean terraces now informs modern indigenous-led conservation, sustainable agriculture, language revitalization, legal advocacy, art, literature, film, and political movements. As this narration reaches its soft landing, imagine only these final, gentle scenes. An elder in a highland village showing a grandchild how to sort potato tubers by feel and color for next season's planting. A weaver in Guatemala tightening the backstrap loom while humming a song her mother taught her. A drum circle on the plains where the heartbeat rhythm has sounded for countless generations. A kayaker on the northwest coast, reading the water the way ancestors once read it from cedar canoes. A grandmother in the Amazon pointing out medicinal vines to her daughter while the forest listens. These are not memories of a lost time. They are the present, breathing quietly, carrying forward what was never truly broken. Your breath is now barely perceptible, slow as moonlight crossing a still lake. Every part of you is at rest, deep, dream-ready rest. The Americas have shared their long, calm story across these nights. Let it settle within you like fine dust after a gentle wind has passed. Sleep comes easily now, completely, peacefully. Continuing from the serene close where living voices in Quechua, Maya, Lakota, and countless other tongues still carry the same rhythms as their ancient forebears, where a child learns to weave the same pattern her grandmother wove, and where the land itself remembers the footsteps of those who tended it long before maps were drawn, let the final layer of this narration unfold with the slowest possible grace. Your breathing has become almost imperceptible, each inhalation and exhalation a soft tide that pulls you deeper into the velvet dark of rest. There is no hurry here. The story has already become part of the quiet within you. Now it simply lingers, stretching itself one last time across the night like the long shadow of a mountain at sunset. Let us walk once more very slowly through the immense quiet beauty of what these civilizations achieved. Not as isolated monuments or forgotten ruins, but as a continuous conversation between people and place that has never truly paused. Consider the sheer patience embedded in every terraced field clinging to an Andean slope. Each stone wall, no higher than a person's waist in many places, was placed by hand, generation after generation, to capture rainwater, prevent soil from sliding away during torrents, and create level steps where maize, quinoa, oca, and aluco could grow in microclimates tuned to altitude. A single terrace might take weeks or months to build properly. An entire mountainside system could represent centuries of cumulative labor. Yet the people who built them did not count the years in the way we do today. They counted seasons, harvests, the return of certain birds, the first frost on high peaks. Time was circular, not linear. Plant, tend, harvest, rest, remember, begin again. In the lowlands of Mesoamerica, the same patience manifested differently. The chinampa builders of the Valley of Mexico did not conquer the lake, they collaborated with it. They wove mats of reeds and water plants, layered them with rich mud dredged from the lake bottom, anchored the edges with willow poles whose roots would hold everything together, and created floating islands that were never quite floating and never quite fixed, living edges between water and earth. On these chinampas, a skilled farmer could produce 7 crops in 2 years. Early maize followed by amaranth, beans climbing the corn stalks, squash spreading below to shade the soil and retain moisture, chilies and tomatoes tucked into corners, flowers grown not just for beauty but to attract pollinators and honor the gods with color. The yield per hectare often surpassed that of modern industrial fields, achieved without chemical inputs, without plows pulled by animals, without metal tools beyond copper and obsidian. The system was so efficient that Tenochtitlan's 200,000-plus residents could be fed largely from the lake's own gardens, with surplus carried by canoe to mainland markets. Far to the north, in the high desert of what is now New Mexico, the people of Acoma Pueblo have lived atop the same sandstone mesa for over 1,000 years. They carry water up the steep trail in clay ollas balanced on their heads, grow corn, beans, and squash in small plots at the base where runoff collects, and descend only when necessary. The mesa itself is both home and fortress. its sheer sides a natural defense, its flat top a place of open sky where ceremonies can speak directly to cloud beings and star ancestors. When Spanish colonizers arrived in the 16th century demanding tribute and conversion, the people of Acoma resisted fiercely. After a brutal reprisal, they rebuilt, quietly reasserting their right to exist on that rock. That continuity, same families, same language, same corn varieties, same reverence for the sky is one of the longest unbroken occupations of a single site in North America. In the vast interior of the Amazon basin, continuity takes yet another form. Many communities practice what ethnobotanists now call forest management, not clearing land for permanent fields, but gently guiding succession so that useful species increase in number and accessibility. Peach palm, Bactris gassipes groves are tended for their starchy fruit and heart of palm. Brazil nut trees, Bertholletia excelsa, are protected because they produce for centuries. Cacao grows semi-wild under taller canopy. These managed forests produce food, medicine, fiber, dyes, and building materials without exhausting the soil. When a family clears a small plot for manioc or bananas, they plant it with a mosaic of species that mimic natural succession, ensuring that when the plot is left fallow after a few years, the forest returns richer than before. The dark, fertile terra preta patches scattered throughout the region are living proof of this long-term stewardship, soil deliberately enriched with charcoal, bone, pottery shards, manure, and kitchen waste, creating pockets of high fertility that persist for hundreds or thousands of years. On the northwest coast, continuity appears in the relationship with salmon. For millennia, families return to the same fishing sites each summer, building weirs of cedar stakes and woven panels that directed fish into baskets or dip nets. The first salmon of the run was always greeted with ceremony, addressed as a relative returning home, thanked for its sacrifice, and shared communally so that its spirit would tell the others it was safe to come. Even today, after industrial fishing, dams, and habitat loss have severely reduced runs, many communities still perform first salmon ceremonies, still teach children how to read the water for signs of returning fish, still honor the reciprocal bond between people and the silver swimmers that once fed entire villages through winter. In the Arctic, Inuit hunters continue to navigate sea ice using traditional Kojimajitukenggit, knowledge that has been passed down. They read pressure ridges, snowdrifts shaped by wind, the color of ice, the behavior of seals and polar bears, the sound of cracking floes, the position of stars when clouds hide the sun. A hunter might travel for days across shifting ice to reach a breathing hole, using an ivory scoop to clear slush, listening for the faint exhale of a seal below, then waiting motionless for hours until the animal surfaces. The kill is quick and respectful. Every part is used: meat for food, blubber for oil lamps, hide for clothing and kayak covers, sinew for thread, bones for tools. Stories of successful hunts and narrow escapes are told in the Kagik Community Hall during the dark months, reinforcing both technique and ethics. These examples, and thousands more like them, are not survivals of a dead past. They are active living systems that have weathered climate shifts, colonial violence, forced relocation, boarding schools, language suppression, and now the accelerating pressures of the 21st century. Each one represents a deliberate choice to remember, to practice, to teach, to adapt without abandoning the core relationship with place and kin, human and more than human. The pre-Columbian world, therefore, is not a closed chapter in a history book. It is an open sentence, still being written in corn pollen scattered on dawn altars, in the knot of a quipu cord that records a community's harvest, in the measured step of a sun dancer facing east at first light, in the careful placement of a stone in a new terrace wall high above an Andean valley, in the soft splash of a cedar canoe gliding toward a spawning stream under a sky filled with returning salmon. Let these images be the last ones you carry tonight, not dramatic or urgent, but ordinary, tender, persistent. A hand smoothing clay on a pot that will hold tomorrow's stew, a voice singing a lullaby in Yucatec Maya to a sleeping child, an elder pointing to a constellation and whispering its story to a grandchild, a woman grinding nixtamalized corn on a metate while the scent of wood smoke drifts through the open door, a fisherman mending a net by firelight, humming the same tune his father hummed. There is nothing more to say for now. The Americas have spoken at length, softly, without demand or conclusion. They ask only that you rest, that you breathe, that you allow the quiet they have cultivated for so many centuries to hold you as well. Your body has become the earth itself, still, heavy, cradled. Your mind is the night sky above it, vast, dark, sprinkled with faint stars that do not need to be named tonight. Sleep arrives like mist rising from a warm lake, enveloping everything without effort. Rest completely. If another evening finds you here, the same patient voice will be waiting. Until then, only peace. Continuing from the velvet hush where a child's small hand learns the same weaving motion as generations before, where salmon return to rivers that have known their silver bodies since the ice withdrew, where a mountain remains silent witness to every footfall across millennia, let the very last breath of this narration settle like fine mist over still water. Your body has long since surrendered to the mattress, the pillow, the blanket, every muscle unwound, every joint softened, every thought dissolved into the slow dark. There is no more story to chase, no more facts to count, only the gentle repetition of breath, in, out, carrying you deeper than words can follow. Yet even in this final drifting, the Americas whisper one last time, not with urgency or grandeur, but with the same ordinary tenderness that has always sustained them. Picture, if the mind still holds the faintest thread of image, a single dawn somewhere high in the Peruvian Sierra. The first pale light touches frost on quinoa stalks. A woman in a hand-woven palera steps barefoot onto cold earth, sprinkles a pinch of coca leaves at the 4 cardinal directions, murmurs a greeting to Pachamama in soft Quechua. She does not think of herself as preserving ancient tradition. She simply begins the day the only way that makes sense, the way her mother began it, the way her daughter will begin it tomorrow. The gesture is as unremarkable to her as brushing hair or lighting a stove, yet it is 5,000 years old, unbroken. Far to the north, on a flat stretch of prairie in what is now South Dakota, a Lakota elder sits cross-legged inside a sweat lodge frame draped in blankets. Steam rises from heated stones when water hisses against them. Songs in Lakota rise and fall, low and steady, asking the spirits for clarity, for strength, for the people to walk in a good way. Outside, children wait their turn, wrapped in towels, already learning that heat and darkness and song can clean more than the body. No one inside is performing heritage for tourists or anthropologists. They are simply doing what has always been done when the world feels heavy. On the Caribbean coast of Belize, a Garifuna drummer taps a segundo rhythm while a singer calls out in Garifuna, the language born from shipwrecked Africans and island Caribs centuries ago. The punta dance begins, hips circling, feet stamping earth, and the circle grows as more join. The song is new words to an old melody, but the pulse is the same one that once sounded on stolen shores and hidden coves. Laughter mixes with the drums. Someone passes a calabash of hudut, coconut fish stew, and the night stretches long and warm. In a small village near the headwaters of the Xingu River in Brazil, an elder of the Guaycurú people sits on a hammock weaving palm fibers into a mat. Around him, children chase each other between thatched malocas. He tells them in a language older than empires how the first people emerged from the underworld through a hole in the earth, how the sun was once too hot until a hero tricked it into climbing higher, how the river must be respected because it is both mother and highway. The children listen half with wonder, half with the casual acceptance children give to things that have always been true. In Alaska, on the edge of the Bering Sea, an Inupiaq hunter sharpens a harpoon point of carved walrus ivory. His grandson watches, learning the angle of the blade, the twist of the wrist. Tomorrow they will go out on the ice, following trails known only by feel and memory, listening for the blow of a bowhead whale beneath the frozen surface. The boy already knows the old rule: take only what you need, use every part, leave thanks in the form of a small offering returned to the water. The knowledge is not taught as culture, it is taught as survival, as kinship, as the only honorable way to live in this place. These moments are happening right now, tonight, tomorrow morning, next week, next winter. They are not museum pieces or reenactments. They are ordinary life continuing. They are proof that the pre-Columbian world did not end in 1492 or in 1600 or in any century since. It bent, it fractured in places, it suffered terrible losses, but it never stopped breathing. The corn that grows in Oaxaca today carries the same genetic memory as the teosinte that people first coaxed into maize 9,000 years ago. The potato cultivars still grown in the Andes number in the thousands, each one selected for taste, texture, color, altitude tolerance, disease resistance, knowledge encoded in living tubers, not in books. The rubber ball still bounces in some villages the way it bounced in Olmec courts 4,000 years ago. The quipu knots are still tied by some elders in remote Andean hamlets recording sheep counts or community obligations. The same medicinal plants, cinchona for fever, willow for pain, datura in careful doses for vision, are still gathered with the same prayers and precautions. And the land remembers, the terraces still hold soil. The canals still carry water when cleaned. The roads still guide footsteps when cleared of brush. The petroglyphs still face the sunrise they were carved to greet. The rivers still flow where people once built fish weirs. The forests still contain groves where useful trees were quietly favored over generations. This is the final quiet truth. Everything we have spoken of across these long hours was never truly past. It was always present tense for someone somewhere, and it still is. Now let even these last images fade. Let the woman in the Sierra become only the soft sound of her own breathing. Let the drum in Belize become only the low throb of your own heartbeat. Let the elder's voice in the Xingu become only the hush of wind through leaves inside your mind. Let the hunter on the ice become only the cool stillness of the pillow against your cheek. There is nothing left to hold on to. No more words, no more pictures. Only the slow, even tide of breath in, out, the Americas rest with you now. Sleep, deep, complete, dream-filled sleep. Thank you for spending this long, calm night here with Sleepy History Past. If these words helped you drift off, please consider subscribing to the channel so you never miss a new bedtime journey through time. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the quiet community growing here. And when you wake, drop a simple comment below. Just tell us where in the world you're watching or falling asleep from Rangpur, New York, Tokyo, Sao Paulo, London, Sydney, anywhere. It's always beautiful to see where these stories travel and where they help bring rest. Sweet dreams wherever you are. Good night.